Wow! Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first look of the newly announced OM1. My name is David Smith. I'm here at OM Digital Solutions, and today I'm going to be speaking to one of our ambassador photographers, and we're going to be talking about the fantastic OM1 that we announced today and going through some of the features, taking a look at the camera itself, and answering some of your questions about it, because that's the main thing, is that you guys and girls all want to know lots of different things about this camera. So first of all, thank you for joining me. There are some awesome people in the background helping me out tonight, so thank you to those. They're going to bring your comments in. They're going to be switching screens for us, so we should hopefully be very smooth. But if there are any technical hiccups, do apologize. We'll get it sorted as quickly as possible. Fingers crossed there won't be. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Tesni Ward, our wildlife ambassador. Hello, Tesni.
Hello. How are you doing? Not bad. How are you?
I'm brilliant. It's so long since I've seen you. It's a whole 3 days.
The weather was lovely, wasn't it?
We saw each other the other day. We saw each other on Saturday whilst we were sneaking around with the OM1 over in a secret location in the Midlands, and it was awful weather, wasn't it? It was really bad. It was so windy. We couldn't. We were trying to do some video. The sound was terrible, but it was great to see you, and it's good to see you again as always.
Yeah, like you say, it's been so long.
Absolutely shocking. So for those of you out there that don't know, this is Tesni Ward. She's one of our fantastic wildlife ambassadors. She spent a little bit of time with the OM1. The weather's not been great here in the UK recently, though, has it? So the time that you've been able to spend with the camera has been quite limited. But hopefully we're going to go through some stuff tonight, get your first impressions of things like handling and features that you've been able to look at, and talk about how that translates into kind of real world photography, particularly for you, because this is, you know, this is your work, your art, your livelihood and everything, isn't it? So
yes, and I tell you what, it may have been a difficult period of time shooting with it, but I'm blown away. I love it. So I'm so excited to be able to talk about it.
It is an exciting time. I mean, I think this morning it was one of those things where I almost dreaded 7 a.m. here in the UK, but was so excited for it at the same time, because I knew, having, like yourself, having seen the camera, having used it and things like that, I kind of knew what was going to come, really. And I think what we want to do is we want to share that now with the rest of the world. Maybe put some of the myths to bed. Obviously, we've seen a lot of people today talking on social media and things, and people not quite sure exactly of some of the improvements that have happened. So we'll do that, and obviously we'll just have a nice old chat about it. Now, I've got some slides that I want to show you, and I'll pull those up in a minute. Oh, well, actually, Mr. Gavin Hoey, who's working tirelessly in the background for us, will pull those up in a minute. But obviously, the first thing we want to talk about is where it came from. You know, this is the OM1. You know, and 50 years ago to the day was the release of the OM1 35mm film SLR camera. So we're exactly 50 years down the line, which is, you know, a fantastic piece of history, isn't it?
When I found out about the new name, I just thought people are going to love this. And even though I wasn't shooting back then, I'm reasonably new to the family, 5-6 years now. I just think, what a perfect time to release this camera, and what a perfect name.
It is. So many people just tagging me in things today saying what a great name. It's absolutely fantastic. I tell you what, okay, let's take a look. I'm going to put on an overhead camera. Shall we have a little look at the kind of physical aspects of the camera? So let me switch that over now. Here we go. So this is the new OM1. Obviously we've got, it's very, very similar to this sort of EM1 Mark III, isn't it, Tez?
Yeah, in terms of how it actually feels, how you use it, I've been used to the EM1X and using the EM1 Mark III as my second shooter. So it took me a tiny bit of time to get used to going back to a slightly smaller camera, but it's so much fun to use. Everything that you're used to is in its normal place. And it actually balances really well with the 150-400, which was a slight concern for me with it being slightly smaller than the EM1X.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something that I was keen to try out as well, was in terms of balance with the longer lenses. Now, of course, there is an additional grip that we'll sort of show further along in the slides if people do feel like they want that extra balance. But let's have a quick kind of look around at some of the main differences physically on the body. Now, I'd like everybody just to ignore this section for the moment. For those that don't know, this is a cable support that actually comes in the box, and this is something that screws into the side and will support what I'll plug into the camera shortly, just in here, which is my HDMI cable. So that kind of helps things to be plugged in and not kind of running away. And there's a section for the USB-C area as well. So that comes in the box, but obviously ignore that for the time being in terms of it wouldn't be on the camera if you were just out shooting. Now, obviously everything else is in the usual places. We've got the power switch where it is up here on top. But really interestingly, I just want to show off something that we talked about on Saturday, and that's these two half crescent buttons here on the top. They've actually been indented, so these are actually lower. They're a curved lower set of buttons. Now, this was put in place to help people to not accidentally catch those buttons on the top and sort of accidentally press them. So you can see that, you can just see that kind of curving just in there. So that's a really, really nice feature on the body. And of course, you've got the standard dial on the top, which still features the locking button, so you can lock on and lock off as well. A few other key functions in this body. We've now got embedded dials, and this is part of the weather sealing. So we've got nice weather sealing on this one, which we'll take a look at in the slides as well. We've got these lovely embedded dials front and back, very, very similar to what was on the EM1X as well. Dedicated buttons for many, many things, including a dedicated high resolution button here, just on the top. So your record button can be dedicated to that functionality. And on the back, we've actually split the AEL button, the auto exposure lock button, and the back button focusing button as well. So we've created two different areas for that. And that's a bit of a game changer in terms of how you sort of use this in terms of ergonomics as well. The rest of the body here, quite similar to EM1 Mark III in the sense that we've got this joystick, the multi-selector, your normal kind of directional keypad, and of course, the memory card slot just here, which houses the two UHS-2 speed slots now side by side. So really, really lovely. Of course, USB-C charging, so it's a USB-C port on that side. Other than that, grips slightly larger, body ever so slightly larger, and a few grams heavier than the previous single deck bodies like this. So, Tesni, in terms of how we, as we went out the other day, obviously we were kind of milling around in a nature reserve. You know, we were hot-footing around. The weather was tragic. We were kind of slipping and sliding all over the mud. But I followed you around with the camera and a 150 to 400 millimeter lens on there, and it just didn't phase you at all, did it?
Like I say, it was a slight concern, and it's the main reason I used the EM1X, because I felt like there was better balancing with a longer lens, but it just felt fine. It's probably also a little bit because I'm used to it. It took me half a day to get used to some of the slightly different positions. Obviously, the dials have moved slightly as well, but now that I'm used to them, I prefer them. And you can lock those two buttons on the top left, because I got sick of knocking them on my old cameras, and I don't typically use them all that often. So they're indented, but you can also actually just turn them off, which is a small feature, but for me, it's quite important.
It is. And I think, you know, we said ourselves, we were looking for small improvements to this from, say, an EM1 Mark III, but in actuality, it's a far different camera, isn't it? If we start digging around at some of the features and the build and the processor and things like that, it is totally different. But just to look at in terms of what we were attracted to in terms of an EM1, which was the lightweight, the mobility, the weather sealing, ease of use, all those excellent things have kind of crossed over to this model. And then we've added in all these squeaky clean features on top as well. So it's a bit of an all-in-one package, really. So what I'd like to do then, Tesni, if that's all right with you, shall we have a little look at some of these slides? We'll talk about some of the features, and you can tell me exactly kind of how you feel they're really going to affect you moving forward. So let's see if my technology works. We'll try and get this up and running. There we go. There's a nice graphic rendering of the camera. Something that I didn't obviously mention as I went over it there was the new Viewfinder. That's got a slightly bigger eye cup now and a slightly different design as well, but we can talk about that as we go through. So ultimately, it is this legacy that we've kind of brought along with us. A lot of the comments today were quite curious about the fact that Olympus is written on the front of the Penta, on the Pentaprism area, alongside OM Systems. And I think and something else that we discussed at the weekend, it's nice that we've brought that legacy with us. This is the full transitional thing now, isn't it? It's bringing that history there of the OM1 and tagging it alongside the first OM system camera body, which makes it quite kind of unique in itself, and has a bit of a chill thing as well, because it's got a real kind of nice kind of film historical feel to it in terms of bringing that brand forward. So 50 years exactly to the day, or a day past Valentine's Day as well. If it would have been a day earlier, that would have been pretty spectacular. I mean, so moving forward with that, in terms of coming from an OM system point of view, myself working for the company for OM Digital Solutions, obviously we've got an idea and a vision in mind, and hopefully those are the things that will appeal to photographers like yourself, Tesni. So some of the things that we are looking at are these 5 kind of major areas, and they're the areas that we want, that the photographic world wants, and where we want to exceed these kind of parts. So as we go through, we're going to be looking at the image quality, the fact that it's next generation image quality. We're going to be looking at things like showing how we can produce better images and than we have done previously, and images that will rival bigger cameras, because we're trying to keep it all at that kind of size. We want to exceed ourselves in computational photography areas, and we want to look at the speed and the reliability of the products that we build as well. And something that I think a lot of people will agree with, that it's pretty much kind of that time where we stepped into real full run and gun video capabilities as well. Again, something else we talked about at the weekend, wasn't it? The video.
Yeah. I mean, for me, photography is my main focus, but I've really enjoyed trying to move into video as well. And I may be still at the beginner stages of trying to capture moving images as well as stills, but the difference between obviously EM1 Mark III, EM1X to this, it's noticeable. I had so much fun trying to capture clips as well as getting images.
That's I remember the conversation we had, I think a couple of years ago, when you said you were going to start to do a lot more video work and things like that. And at the time, I really had no idea about video. I'm very much a stills photography kind of guy, no idea. And you were saying things that even I was going, I don't know, I wouldn't know. And I've sort of been pushed into an area where I've had to kind of learn about it. And as I've done that, and obviously chatting with photographers like yourself that are also dipping their toes into videography, seeing some of the features that's come out of this has really, really started to excite people. So we'll have a look at that as we go through as well. Let's see. One of the first things we'll look at will be the image quality, and it is kind of next generation. It's absolutely fantastic. Even to us inside the company, when it arrived, we were absolutely blown away. These are the kind of 3 things that are coming together for us to make that image quality. That new sensor, Tesni. Oh my goodness me. Let's talk about that. Now, we were trying to say this on Saturday as well. So when we were trying to say the full name of the technology, the kit, I think we had about 5 or 6 goes at it. We were just getting tongue-tied because it goes,
painful.
Do you want to do it or shall I do it?
No, you do it.
Okay. So it is a stacked backside illuminated live MOS sensor. Okay, so, and that's really, really important in terms of the fact that it's stacked. So we're creating much faster readout speeds. We're getting much better low light capability. The backside illuminator part of that is helping us with that low light performance. We're getting a whole 2 stops of positive ISO performance, which is ridiculously good if we think about it, isn't it? I mean, so that takes us from natively, what we were running 6400 to the native top end on auto ISO, weren't we, on the last ones?
Yeah, I mean, typically when I was advising people, I said about 3200 you're going to be reasonably comfortable. But would you rather have a slightly grainy image or a blurred one? So if you've got to put it up, 6400 is probably my ceiling. That's as far as I'm willing to go. But when I had this new camera, I didn't care where I had to go. It was whatever situation I'm working with, I'll just let the ISO do what it needs to do. and I'm not worried. And that's such a big relief. As a photographer, we don't necessarily care as much about the specs and the technical aspects. All we care is that we can get a good image. And it's been a lot of fun being able to push the ISO so much further without worrying about it.
Yeah, it blew me away the other day when I was just doing some, you know, for the best part, you are the creative aspect of this particular conversation. I'm the tech nerd that points it at, you know, something dark in the corner and compares it to an image on another camera. And I did do that the other day, and I shot just a couple of test shots of something in this room, actually, with all the lights off. So it was a true dark experience. And I shot at 6400 ISO on the new camera, on the OM1, then at 12,800, and then at 25,600, which is the top end of native. 25,600 was the top end of everything on previous models. And now, because of this new sensor and the processor and everything else, we're now sitting 25,600 top end native before it goes to 102,500. And shooting 25,600 and comparing that to 6,400 on the previous model is a massive, massive thing. When you talk about things, so for you, I think probably we're going to see this in things like feather detail.
Yeah, typically noise is the most noticeable when the subject is taking up a small portion of the frame. And it can actually be beneficial when your subject's closer and it's got more detail. But I was doing lots of tests on birds because, in my opinion, they are one of the best things to test it on. You start to lose the detail in the feathers. And again, I wasn't concerned. I was doing some pixel peeping on the back, and then I was obviously putting it on the computer back home, and it's noticeably improved. And with technology and noise reduction on top of that, I don't think that I'm going to be that bothered about noise anymore or pushing my eyes so high.
It's good. It's a confidence builder, isn't it? And I think that's what's important. I just want to let everybody know that we are taking questions in a little while. So if you have put a question in, we've got the back house team that are starring those for me. We'll come to those, and I'll do a couple at a time as we go through and try to make sure that everybody's questions are answered. So alongside our 2 stops of ISO performance in the positives, we're also getting a whole stop extra dynamic range. Now, for those of you that aren't quite sure what an extra stop of dynamic range means, it comes down to how much we're pushing in highlights and shadows, isn't it, Tesni?
Yes, and for me, I shoot in RAW. I always shoot in RAW so that you can maintain as much detail as possible. And typically for me, it's bringing those highlights back a little bit and bringing those dark bits, those black bits up as well. So being able to push it a little bit further when you have high contrast scenes is going to be really beneficial.
All right, excellent stuff. So those are the kind of areas you're going to see differences in initially from that stacked backside illuminated sensor. It's just rolling off the tongue now. I think from now on we'll call it the stacked sensor. Does that sound all right to you, Tez? It makes it a bit easier. I'm looking at some of the questions now just because I want to hit a couple as we go through. There's one here from Skip that I'm just going to answer. Skip wants to know what comes in the box. It's nice and simple. You're going to get your camera. In the box, you are going to get your new BLX1 battery, which is a brand new battery for this system. We will talk about that during this presentation as well. You're going to get a cable support for tethering, which is a clip that holds onto the side when you're tethering. And you also get this fixed cable support as well that I showed you in the overhead. This is such a useful bit of kit when you are using a HDMI output cable or a USB cable into the side of the camera. It supports everything and stops any kind of stress or tension on the cable port itself. You're going to get a beautiful OM strap, which I can dig out of the box here for you because it is lovely. It's absolutely fantastic. It's very sleek. Oh, there's a lot of rattling around in that box because we've got new OM system lens caps and rear caps and things like that. So we've got our lovely OM system OM1 strap that's going to be in there as well, which is nice and sleek. You'll get an AC charging block. So the camera doesn't come with a battery charger in the box. It will come with an AC charging block and USB-C charging in camera, which, to be honest with you, is super, super convenient and very, very quick as well. If you do want a charger, there are chargers available, which I'll touch on later on. And then obviously, if you've got a lens in there, you'll get the lens as well. So that's kind of what comes in the box, Skip. And answering Trevor's question there, does it have a new battery grip? Yes, it does. And we'll touch on that later on to show you what the battery grip and what the code names are as well. Okay, so Tesni, let's talk about the processor. Because it's the heart of the beast, isn't it? Really, and we've moved up through processor names. We went through the processors of TruePic engines, 7, 8, 9, and we're on TruePic X. So this numerically, everyone thinks it's TruePic 10, which it is, but we're calling it TruePic X, which is quite nice. It's quite fitting. And the TruePic X processor is now 3 times faster. So all those funky features that we have that we're going to cover later on are all going to be delivered 3 times faster. And that gives us, you know, the 120 FPS sensor readout speed. So the nerdy part of that, Tesni, means that if we're shooting anything fast moving, you're looking at approximately 8.3 milliseconds of readout, which means that you're almost, if not very much so, eliminating rolling shutter. What kind of animals do you think that that will affect when you're shooting? Sort of what's the speedy ones that you'll be shooting at?
So I would argue for many people it's going to be birds, especially in the UK. We have things like puffins, we have lots of small songbirds and garden birds. And sometimes you can get everything right, but you'll have several frames and the wing will maybe be in the same place. And it's not necessarily the most photogenic. So being able to have so many more frames to choose from means that you're going to absolutely nail the best shot possible. You're not going to have to worry about if you're panning very quickly, camera's going to keep up, it's just going to keep firing away. So it does have some massive real life implications for me as the photographer.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking a lot about those kingfishers and tiny birds that do have a superbly fast wing beat. Hummingbirds, things like that, because we see quite often, we'll see hummingbird pictures that do encounter the rolling shutter effect because they are one of the fastest wing beats in the world, and this should help to at least go some way to either preventing it or eradicating it depending on what you're shooting. So that's really, really good, and that comes down to that processor. So a lot of what we've designed in this model is being supported by this processor. It is the heart of the beast. Now, obviously, we are industry leaders in things like in-body image stabilization, and this camera is no exception. So we are generating 7 stops of image stabilization in the camera over 5 axes, which will go up to 8 stops if using something like the 150-400 lens, which you use pretty much constantly. In terms of how that feels like in real life, how did you get on with it?
What's a tripod? Because I've not used one for the longest time. Obviously, the longer your focal length, the more noticeable any camera movement will be. So image stabilization is important, and I don't necessarily like being restricted to a tripod. I can't move easily if something's behind me, so I never worry about my movement. I don't worry about camera shake. I go everywhere without a tripod. If I desperately need to, I'll use my bag. But it's noticeable, and the best thing you can do is just turn the stabilization on and off, and you see how much it's compensating for your movement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a stark reminder of how much coffee I drink when I turn the stabilizer off.
Pretty much.
And as a new to the coffee world person, I'm sure you'll probably agree as well.
9 days in.
9 days in, what a legend.
9 days in.
So image stabilization, really, really superb. That's something that we've always excelled at, so we've really kind of pushed that forward as well. We're going to just have a look at some more comments as we go through and just try and tip on a couple every slide. Brian Miller, we can put Brian's question up there. Brian's pre-ordered the OM1 already. Brian wants some examples of the new star tracking. So I'm bringing this in there because I think this is one of those false features that's been seen on there. The camera doesn't have a star tracking feature, despite having many other fantastic features built into the camera. There isn't a star tracking feature built in there. So it's really important that we clear that up straight away. That's why I wanted to pop that in there, Brian. But obviously there are lots of other amazing things in there that will be there to support you with when your OM1 arrives. Mark is asking about that two-stop high dynamic range. The question has just gone, but he wanted to know, does it follow through into video and RAWs? And yes, it absolutely does. Obviously, at the moment, all the RAW files we're viewing only through the OM Workspace software. So the updated OM Workspace software is what we're using to view these files at the moment. And in video, there is actually another feature that we'll have a look at called HLG, which is hybrid log gamma, which is a high dynamic range way of shooting video. So we will have access to that as well. Okay, let's take a look at some more of these slides. Let's go through some more and see what we can see, what else this camera has got. If my slideshow works. There we go. Okay, so here it is. We're looking at the cross. Oh, hang on. Let me just check. I think I may have skipped a slide. No, I didn't skip a slide there. That's fine. We're now looking at the cross quad pixel AF. This is something else that we were struggling to say quite regularly at the weekend, wasn't it? Yeah. But ultimately, we sat down and had a really good discussion about what this means, because this is something that obviously everybody is new to, not just me, not just Tesni, but cross quad pixel AF is brand new. This is a first for the consumer camera range, and ultimately it's only now available on the OM1, and it means that we're getting phase difference detection autofocus in 4 directions. So Tez and I were discussing this the other day, and we were kind of discussing the structure of how this works in the sensor. And you've got those little lenses on top, the photosight lenses on top of the sensor there. You've got your RGB value pixels underneath, and underneath those, each one is split into 4 further pixels, which can cross type phase detect AF in all 4 directions. And what that means in real life is that it's about speed and the ability to track and follow something. And that's basically resulting in 3 to 4 times faster performance in that area. What was your experience of now having the difference between, you were using phase detect on the EM1? What's your experience of now using the phase detect with cross quad pixel autofocusing, Tez?
It was noticeable, but it wasn't as noticeable as when you guys took the camera off me and I had to go back to my old ones, which are still fabulous, but there is a noticeable difference in terms of how quickly it would acquire the subject, how well it would track it. And I think I've given pretty much everyone in the team a headache at some point, because my advice has typically been, don't use the tracking, because it can be good, but do you want it to go wrong at the worst time possible? And the answer is usually no. I did not take the tracking off the entire time I had the camera. It is so much better. Just let me have the camera for longer, please. It feels like you're taking away an arm when you take it off me.
And I know we bumped heads on that particular opinion quite a few times, but it was so nice to hear you say it was that vote of confidence when I saw you at the weekend to say, for all that time that I've talked about taking tracking off and using it in certain ways, on this occasion, I really, really enjoyed it, and it's made such a difference. So for us to hear that from somebody like yourself who has the merit to have that kind of comment, it's an amazing confidence booster. So we've got this cross quad pixel autofocusing system that's working across all of these AF points. So we'll go on to look at those. There's 1053 AF points there, edge to edge, complete coverage. This is a jump from 121 points, which we thought was pretty good, and it covered 99% of the sensor, but this is absolutely phenomenal. Now there are so many points that we can't show them individually on the grid as we used to do, so it has to navigate around all on its own, this singular point, if you have it just in single point. But we've got that absolutely fantastic cross quad pixel AF across those 1053 points. And because it's that 120 frames per second sensor readout combined with 1053 AF points and cross quad pixel AF, which is a world first, the response is just like lightning, as you've said. It's really, really quick. So obviously I talked about ISO, you talked about ISO. That standard sensitivity is now up to 25,600, which is ridiculous. That's a brilliant native ISO to be running this. The Micro Four Thirds system hasn't seen that previously to this level. which is phenomenal. And high dynamic range, because we've got that extra stop, so we're looking at pulling out, you know, the highlights and the shadows, whether that be in the bird photography, animal photography, sports, landscapes, this outdoor stuff, you know, your skies and your lands. We'll all be able to we'll be able to pick them apart really easily. And again, IS, super important for if you want to do really long shutter speeds. Now, people come to me and they say, how long feasibly, realistically, can I hand hold something? And you know what, would you agree? It depends on the focal length of the lens that you're using, and it depends how much coffee you've had. All those things come into play, right?
I think that it depends on your genre of photography. So if you're doing landscapes, for the most part, you will be using shorter focal lengths in comparison to wildlife. So I think people have done over 8 seconds handheld with landscapes quite easily, and you can probably do longer if you lean against a post or a car. With wildlife, sometimes I am genuinely shooting at the maximum range, 2000 millimeters of equivalent focal length. So I won't be achieving 8 seconds doing that. But it's definitely noticeably more stable, and I can get away with slower shutter speeds in comparison to when I didn't have such good image stabilization. I need more coffee, apparently.
It's too late in the day for me. I'm a seasoned coffee drinker, and I know it's a dangerous time of the day to be drinking coffee, but you are being new to it, you could probably get away with it. And so, I mean, reasonably, if we talk about using longer lenses, what do you think is the kind of slowest you've gone, let's say on a stationary subject, obviously, what's the slowest you think that you've probably managed yourself on a longer lens?
Half a second.
That's amazing. I still really, I mean, I thought you were going to say, you know, 2 seconds or something like that on a long lens, but half a second is phenomenal. That's really good.
I mean, it's obviously dependent on the wildlife moving as well. So it's very rare that they stay still long enough for super long shutter speeds. But if the light is abysmal and it's my only choice, I do sometimes drop it very slow, just in the hope I get something.
Excellent. Let's pull up a couple of the questions relating to things like tracking. We've got Rick's question, who's talking, who says is particularly interested in how the bird tracking compares to the EM1X. I think this is a perfect question for yourself. What would you say compared to an EM1X, bird tracking on the OM1?
It's a no-brainer. Like I said, historically, I advised against tracking. With this, I haven't turned it off. It's on all the time. So worlds apart is all I'll say. It's so much better.
It is a massive improvement, isn't it? And I think because so much work has gone into particularly the AI part of this camera, you know, not just in bird tracking, but in all aspects, AI is vastly important now to us as a company. We're pushing forward very heavily with it. So I'm glad to hear your thoughts on that one. There's one here that I'll answer for Photomaker. Photomaker is asking how the OM1 compares to the current products feature-wise, either the EM5 Mark III or the EM1 line. So ultimately, there are some very similar features that are crossed over from EM5 Mark III, things like you've got Pro Capture and all of the computational stuff that already has, like live composite and high res. The same with the EM1 Mark III. You've obviously got Pro Capture up to a slightly higher level. In the OM1, you get everything that comes with those previous models. There is no loss from EM5 or EM1 lines, but you gain speed and you gain more features and you gain better focusing. So there's increases in all of those areas, and we should see a little bit more on the slides as we go through. Joan has asked, is it true that there is no GPS? That's correct. There is no GPS chip in this particular camera. So that is something that if you're an EM1X user and you're thinking about OM1, you do need to take that into consideration, that the EM1X has a GPS chip, whereas the OM1 does not have a GPS chip. But there is no other loss from EM1X in terms of going towards an OM1. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow. Let's have a look at the next part of this, which is computational photography. So let's see what comes out of that. There is one of the beautiful pictures from Hanu. Hanu is one of our ambassadors who's running some amazing light painting. And I know that there are parts of this presentation that Tesni and I talked about the other day, and there's a lot of parts of these that perhaps she doesn't use directly, but we know so many awesome photographers within our ambassador group that are really making the most out of some of these, and it's really exciting stuff. So let's look at computational photography. Now, computational photography features have existed within the Olympus cameras for a long time. It's something that they've always been super, super good at. Innovation was a big part of everything in terms of Olympus, but coming across now to OM System, we decided that computational photography is even more important to assist with the future of photography. That's what it's all about, and we're trying to keep the future of photography very much alive. This is Hanu, and one of his amazing light painting features talks about bringing your photography to a new level. These are superbly artistic tools that we have within the camera. This particular image is done by the live composite feature, which is a light painting star trails feature that is in many of the existing Olympus cameras now, the OMD series. Moving into the OM1 series, one major thing has now happened with things like live composite, and because of that processor that you found so good at tracking the birds and keeping up with the autofocus and everything else, that also now assists us to do handheld light painting. No tripod necessary for this kind of handheld light painting, and that's how much extra power that processor is giving us. And it's also giving us the power to do this. You know, this is an amazing feat of autofocus speed, keeping up with this dog running that gauntlet there. And that's down to that cross quad pixel AF that we struggled to say so much at the weekend. So it's an absolutely phenomenal piece of technology. Now, obviously, this is focusing on a dog, which is part of the new subject detection range, because we've added that extra in, haven't we? Dogs and cats are in there, birds are in there, your favorites, motorsports, aerial vehicles, trains. I like a train now and again as well. And it's that kind of group of subject detection that we've added in to complete this part of the feature set. Now, can you confirm, obviously, we're watching a video there of the speed at which those white boxes are keeping up with that dog. Can you confirm the fluidity at which that kind of focusing worked for you?
Can confirm. I remember I got the camera, it was late in the evening, and naturally the first thing I wanted to do was play with it. And I was pointing it around my room. I've got a hare statue, I've got like a cheetah statue, I've got cuddly toys. And it was just picking them up, and I'm thinking, this doesn't match the AI, but it's still finding it. It's still finding an eye. And then when I was actually using it on birds, again, I was doing some stuff with small birds that were flying off, and it was finding their eye, it was finding their face, and it was just following. And there was no lag, there was no delay, and it's madness. I'm converted.
It's been a long time in development, I think, and this is what it's showing itself to have been really kind of well thought through, really well designed, and things like that are absolutely superb in terms of being able to offer us this extra functionality. So with that in mind, we've obviously got things like high-res shot. So high-res shot is something that we talked about as well. We love high-res shot. High-res shot in your genre, I think, you know, if you've got stationary subjects, is it something that you feel is going to be something that you really want to spend a lot more time exploring?
There's definitely occasions where I would like to have a really high resolution image. But again, wildlife, it does move quite a bit, even if it's just a slightly windy day and the fur on the back of a badger can be blowing about. So there's definitely circumstances in which I want to try this. It's just got to be the right subject or the right conditions.
Absolutely. And I think if we look at again, coming down to the processor in terms of things moving, I think we've definitely moved forward, and it's worth challenging ourselves with those subjects that might have kind of fur blowing in the wind. The processor is now being developed even further to account for artifacts like that. So definitely throw it into the mix and see what you can get out of it. We've also placed the button on the top. The record button on top of the camera now is fully dedicated by default to being a high-res instant shot access. So that's absolutely brilliant in terms of ergonomics. We've improved existing features like the live ND functionality, the built-in live neutral density functionality that previously went up to ND32, which is 5 stops of light. And we've got some absolutely amazing landscape photographers who have been clawing over this feature. Now we've put that up and we've gone up another stop to ND64, which we thought wouldn't be possible on the previous model, you know, but now this processor with the extra power and the extra speed has enabled us to go to ND64. And again, ergonomics, you can program buttons to be your live ND button. Pressing and holding those buttons and enable you to change the ND level between them. So the functionality and the efficiency are really, really smooth. And of course, live composite, now handheld. This is an amazing thing. Another one of Hanu's images. This is amazing. This is like a mama bear and a baby bear. It's absolutely brilliant. I love this kind of stuff. If any of you are not familiar with Hanu's work, please take a look at some of the images that we're putting out. Take a look at his images. Really, really phenomenal in terms of this particular genre. Absolutely beautiful creative work. And focus stacking, that's another one of our computational features. Tesni, is this something that you've used at all? Because I don't know how small do your subjects get?
I definitely don't reach Geraint's level small with his bugs and his insects, but I do things with common lizards that are quite small. I want to do more with things like toads and lizards. So you're working with such a shallow depth of field that focus stacking is something that I like to play with. So having a little bit more functionality will definitely be beneficial.
And the extra functionality with focus stacking now is the speed at which it delivers. So focus stacking previously, you'd be looking at it taking sort of 5 seconds to process. About 15 seconds to process in the background, and now we're looking at a 5-second process, which means we can get straight on and take another shot. And as I'm preaching to the choir in terms of explaining that to you, but wildlife moves quickly. It's not going to hang around for us all day. It's going to change position, if in fact it ever shows up for us in the first place, given the absolutely terrible weather that we've had.
We saw so much on the weekend.
Oh, I know. It was just one of those crazy weekends, and it's been absolutely dire here, but hopefully that will get better, and we can get you back out there with this camera. So let's have a quick look at some of the other questions that we've got in here. Mike's been asking, is bird tracking better than the EM1X, and is continuous focus any better? Yet Tesni's given us a thumbs up a couple of times on that one now, saying that there is a noticeable improvement, in the sense that when we took the camera off her, she didn't like it very much. Fuzzy Wuzzy, what a great name, has asked if the OM1's joystick is more responsive than the EM1X. The joystick's responsiveness isn't adjustable, no, but it is a very responsive joystick. So I think you'll find that will be nice ergonomically. And Dave is asking, is it only available in black? Yes, it is only available in black. The OM1 will be black only. One more. Yeah, well, I mean, here we go. You see, there's customization. And the thing is, as well, with the weather sealing, maybe it can be hydro dipped. I'm not advising that officially, but please don't hydro dip your OM1. But you can customize it as much as you like. It's your camera when you get it. And I'll do one more before we have a look at some other things as well. We'll move on to speed next. We'll answer questions from Mike. Mike is asked, how is the newer 12-40 different from the current one? Well, of course, we also announced the 12-40 f2.8 Pro Lens Mark II, which is now obviously branded with OMSYSTEM. It has better weather sealing than the original 12-40, because that lens was the first Pro lens that we developed. We're looking at sort of 8 years ago. So obviously technology moves on in terms of weather sealing, and the lens itself has been slightly more developed in terms of the computational features, things like focus stacking, pro capture. It'll operate at a much smoother and more efficient way. So there are lots of things that have been adjusted in that, just to bring it up to speed, with it being kind of the original being the first one that we did. Okay, so let's come back to the slideshow. Let's see what we've got next. There we go. There's an example of one of our fast-moving feathery friends, which is really important now in terms of looking at speed, and the speed is unparalleled. So we are looking at some monumental figures here. First thing we'll look at in terms of the speed, and obviously in terms of being able to shoot, is the viewfinder, because the viewfinder is brand new. This is something that we've now gone, I think we're probably a little bit overdue on, I would say, safely. We've gone now to 5.76 million dots OLED viewfinder. And how clear is this viewfinder, Tesni?
It's noticeably better. And again, you notice it significantly when you've got the two side by side. So it definitely put less strain on my eyes as the day went on, and I could just see things clearer, which is always beneficial when they're moving about.
That's it. And as a spectacle wearer, obviously nice, clean, crisp, fast viewfinders are really, really important to me. And I felt really nice and comfortable using the viewfinder on the OM1. Clarity is phenomenal. This is 120 frames per second readout. So 5.76 million dots, magnification of 0.83 times, and the display lag of 0.005 seconds. 120 frames per second high-speed performance, which is absolutely phenomenal, nice and clean and clear. And it's also got an anti-fogging coating on the viewfinder as well. So this is an additional feature added in to add to the reliability of it. So it's got that nice anti-fogging. I believe this is something similar that we've got in our TG range as well. So we've got that to help us to create these kind of speeds. We've got our time machine pro capture, which is a fantastic function that we love it, don't we, Tesni?
Again, I will admit I don't use it super frequently, but when I got it, I just thought I have to play with this. And the extra frames, especially 50 frames with autofocus per second, it's nuts. So when I was waiting for birds to take off from feeding stations, for example, it just got it. No, I didn't miss a shot.
That's the thing, isn't it? We've not only improved the speed, we've gone from 18 frames per second on our EM1 Mark III, EM1X series in tracking. We've now gone to 50 frames per second in tracking. So we've more than doubled it. Those 50 frames per second in Pro Capture, that translates a possible up to 70 frames before you press the shutter. So before you think the action is happening, we can gather 70 frames in a rolling buffer. And if we're shooting a fixed point like a bird feeder or something else where we can zone focus, then we're ramping that frames per second in terms of shooting speed up to 120 frames per second, so which is delivering super, super huge sequences of images. And then it comes down to those fast moving subjects being captured in a much more efficient way. So that's really, really impressive, alongside the fact that now, regardless of whether you're shooting pro capture or a burst or sequential or any form of high speed moving shooting in the camera, it's absolutely blackout free. So what did you feel when you first kind of had that true blackout free experience?
I was so happy. I usually give feedback to the team every 3 to 6 months on things that I would like to see in new cameras, and blackout free shooting has been something I have pestered them for forever. So the fact that I now have it, it's game changing. It's so useful when you're, for me, I do a lot of slow shutter speed images, so I'm panning with a bird, I'm trying to get that motion and movement. When it blacks out, it's a bit of a problem because I need to keep the subject in the same part of the frame throughout the exposure. It's not a problem anymore. It's so useful.
It is amazing. So in terms of that kind of shooting, we've got these kind of figures here. So we're looking at sequential shooting. You've got up to 120 frames per second, but again, the user has complete control of these. We've got a couple of different shooting modes now. You've got sequential shooting, which is mechanical, 1 to 10 frames per second with tracking. You've got silent sequential shooting, which of course is an electronic shutter, 5 to 20 frames in 5-frame steps with tracking. And then you've got SH1, which is our new shooting mode, 60, 100 or 120 frames per second. It sounds ridiculous, but 60, 100 or 120 frames per second without AF tracking, that's locked AF, and then 25 or 50 with AF tracking. So many different options to shoot in terms of speed. That obviously brings us through into the AI detection for birds, aerial vehicles, motorsports. That includes bikes, your planes, and your cats and dogs as well. 2 times more accurate, 3 times faster because of the new processor. Again, that processor, the heart of the beast, is really pushing through on so many of these features and creating a massive difference. We've hit this really kind of almost on a vertical slope now of improvements. It's going up that kind of quickly. We struggled to cover all the things when we met each other at the weekend. We were struggling. We were out there for a few hours and struggled to kind of cover everything that the camera's doing differently. We just had to settle down and focus on a few things, didn't we?
Yes, and honestly, we covered so much and half of it just went in one ear and out the other. So it's going to take me a while to be able to remember all of the new bits and bobs that have come in. But for
Yeah.
me, the last big upgrade like this was when the EM1 Mark 1 became the Mark 2, and there was such a noticeable jump in image quality and autofocus. And then the improvements throughout the range have been good, but this is just noticeable. This is more than a jump. This is a plane ride to
Yeah.
another sphere.
I would absolutely agree. I would definitely liken it to that product line jump from EM1 Mark 1 to Mark 2. And now with the added technology that we have available to us, it's even bigger. Let's go to some of our questions that I've got linked up here. So I'm going to go to Christian Rogers' question here. This is a great question. He's asking, what's the blue star next to the ISO button? The blue star next to the ISO button is a really, really cool new feature. If I bring this in here. So if we look on top of here, you've got your ISO button here, and next to it, you've got a little blue star. And what that relates to is when you're running playback of your images on the back screen, you can actually press and hold this and apply a star rating system, which is something that will work automatically in software such as Workspace or Lightroom and things like that. And you can apply a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star rating system to the images that you've already taken, and that will obviously cut down on your post-edit work later on if you're doing that kind of in the field. So that was a great question, Christian. Thank you so much for adding that in there. Charles is asking about slower and older SD cards. The question is, are they still usable? And my absolute answer from a technical and nerdy point of view is yes, but I wouldn't, because you're really not going to experience the true performance of the equipment by putting in a UHS 1 card or older, sort of less than class 10, things like that. So I do recommend using a really good quality UHS 2 high-speed card. Tesni, from a wildlife photographer professional's point of view, what would you say on that matter?
It's like buying a Ferrari and putting really cheap scrapyard tires on them. You're restricting the functionality so much that why would you upgrade the camera in the first place? I have used UHS 2 cards for the longest time, and it just means that I never hit my buffer. I can just shoot pretty much forever. I've got large memory capacity, so I don't think I ever run out of memory card space. And you don't want to be in that scenario where something so small limits you in such a massive way. So if you can justify it, get UHS 2s, and you'll be a very happy photographer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would completely agree with you on that one, just from the tech specs point of view. I'm going to take Jane's question here because I think it's quite important that I take Jane's question before we move on to the next slide. Jane is asking that this is a £2,000 camera or equivalent in local currency wherever you are in the world. Why doesn't it come with a battery charger? Because the charger is extra £120 on top. It's a really good question, and I think the easiest way to answer that is that USB-C charging in camera is really, really efficient. It's super easy, super convenient. You can just fast charge USB-C into the camera with the battery that's in there. And I've been charging in less than 2 hours full batteries with mine, and it's no more hard work than plugging my mobile phone in. So being able to charge that with that option has been fantastic. I also have my mobile solution to that, which is a PD power bank, and my camera again will charge in less than 2 hours from my power delivery power bank as well. Now you can get the charger. The charger does charge. It's a dual charger. It charges 2 batteries at the same time. That is an extra. It's an additional if you want to do that. And many of the pre-order offers around the world will include a free battery. So if you're pre-ordering, you'll actually get the camera with the battery and a second battery, so you can have one charged and you can have it charging in the camera as well. We'll talk a little bit more about charging as we go through with that, but it is a really, really nice, efficient and simple way to do it. Tesni, you sometimes will go out for days and days at a time. You're practically living in the vehicle and you don't have access to things like that. Power bank chargers for you, bit of a godsend?
Yes, I have 2 power delivery. Is that the right term?
Yeah, yeah.
Power delivery. I have 2 of them. They can charge my batteries. Each one can charge about 5 or 6 full battery charges. So they last a long time. So typically, if I am living out of my car for 2 or 3 days, which happens far more often than I care to admit, I will either plug them up while I'm moving. I have my power bank with me. And when I'm back in the car, I will just be charging them up, getting ready for the following day. So with this, you can power and charge it at the same time. I mean, it's just so much more useful in comparison to when you could only do one or the other on the EM1X.
Yeah, that's it. To be able to do both at the same time, we'll touch on that in some of the next slides coming up, is really, really useful. Let's go back to the slides. Let's have a little look at what we've got coming through next on here. So our point number 4 is about absolute reliability. This is where we talk about how much we can put the camera through, you know, and I know how you use your camera. Sometimes you've seen me, I grit my teeth and I go, oh my goodness me. But ultimately you are using it in the way it was meant to be used, aren't you? It is out there, it is a workhorse, and it is really, really being put through punishing conditions. And I imagine that this camera for you will not be any different. The great thing about this is its improvements to weather sealing has now made it the world's only IP53 rated system. Now, by system, that includes the newer lenses that are IP53 rated, the body as well. So we've got that splash proof, dust proof, performance, freeze proof to -10 degrees in terms of operability, storage at -20 degrees. And as you can see there, we really do put it through its paces in terms of making sure that there's no ingress from that water. Are you quite regularly exposing it to all elements, aren't you, Tesni?
I don't know what you're talking about. I treat my equipment fabulously, and it constantly lives in
I've got
bubble wrap.
photographs that would prove otherwise.
No, don't know what you're talking about. No, I work with a couple of other brands, and they call it the Tesni test. If it survives me using it for a month or so, then it's good to go. It's a tool, and I use it as such. If I have to crawl over rocks, if I have to lie in snow for hours, the camera's going to be there doing it with me. If I'm on a beach and I get sand on my equipment, the sand used to get stuck in my lenses and in all of the nooks and crannies of my older cameras. These days, it's a bottle of water, pour it over, clean, happy to go on shooting. So, you know, I haven't yet dunked it fully in water, which I do not advise doing. Yeah, don't do that. I've partially dunked it, but we won't talk about that. I haven't yet had it completely frozen on the mountains because we haven't had the weather for it. But if it's anything to go by from the prior systems and the prior cameras, I'm going to have no problem with this at all. So we'll see if it survives the Tesni test.
Oh, sorry, my PowerPoint is going absolutely. It all had a mind of its own then. So if we'll keep maintaining the Tesni test on that one. And of course, if you've got cables and things like we just discussed in camera charging, you know, the performance of IP53 is also when you've got cables plugged in. So that doesn't remove any of that performance. USB or HDMI cables being connected, it's absolutely fine. Of course, there we go, taking it up into the snow, -10 degrees, -20 for storage. The shutter unit, of course, that comes from a long line of very durable shutter units with a rating of 400,000 actuations. The supersonic wave filter, that's the dust reduction system, that's pretty much a standard in any of our models and keeps getting better. It vibrates at 30,000 times per second to kick off anything that's sitting on that sensor. Let's talk about the new battery. BLX1, it is a new battery, but it is better power technology. We're looking at getting 25% more shots. So this is CEPA rated for about 520 shots in real time. Tesni, I think you'd probably get more out of that if you're looking at a real time situation.
So when it was initially sent to me, my immediate response was, why is there only one battery? This isn't going to last me half a day. But the reality was I was using Pro Capture. I was easily squeezing sometimes 3,000 to 5,000 shots out of a single charge. I was really just trying to push the camera to its limits, test all of the little features and functionality. And yes, I did eventually run out of battery, but typically it was towards the end of the day. So in a real world situation, I would typically have 2 batteries, so it wouldn't be as much of a problem.
Well, coming back to running out of battery is with those power delivery power banks, you know, you now, the improvement to this above other models is that, yes, you can charge it when it's switched off and you can power it when it's switched on. But now you can do both. So when it's on and you're using it and carrying on shooting and it's connected to a power bank, it's also charging the battery in the background. Exactly how your mobile phone would work if you were using it whilst plugged into a socket or anything else like that. So that's the improvement, and that's the new battery technology that we've had to kind of move forward with. So that's the key to this one. Let's have a look at some of the questions. We've got one from Roger asking about the 8 stops stabilization. Is it only available with IS lenses? Yes, so you're getting 7 stops with the body alone, 8 stops with the sort of 12 to 100, 300, 150 to 400 range. That's your addition. Charles is asking about the cold weather performance of the new battery. Again, operability, operations down to minus 10 degrees. That's the kind of key point for us. And that should still operate as a standard at minus 10 degrees. Mike is asking about the 2 stops improvement in ISO, which I think we covered earlier. Is it RAW, just JPEG? No, it is RAW. The one thing you have to remember at this time is that all of our RAW editing and processing is being done through OM Workspace, which is our native software to edit those RAWs. But that 2-stop improvement is there in the RAWs for you. T Lim has asked, with the new menu system, which we haven't even touched on yet, we are well coming up to the time when people will be kicking us off soon, Tesni, but we haven't even touched on that one. T's asked if there's going to be a quick menu too. Yes, there is a My menu, there is a super control panel, and there is a full menu as well. So nice and easy. And I'm going to come to Raman's question in a second, because that's a really cool one for you, Tesni, and I'll give you some chance to explain it. But we'll go back to the slideshow and see if we can push through and look at a few more of these cool features. Dual UHS-2 slots. So both of those card slots are UHS-2, the high speed, like the EM1X, which is a massive improvement, really, isn't it, Tez, in terms of saving in speed and backup, would you say?
I'm a naughty photographer who doesn't back up, because whilst I'll be very upset if I lose some images due to a corruption or something, luckily, touch wood, it's not happened for me. And the only time I would do a dual backup is if I was shooting a commission or something where I have to get the images or it's never happening again. So typically I just have auto switch over. God forbid if I have the best shoot in the world and I completely fill my memory card, I don't want to be stopped by saying memory card full. I can't deal with that, because you can guarantee it will be at the point where you need it the most. So I just always have auto switch over, and then it's just keep on shooting. I don't even realize the memory's flipped over to slot 2.
And that's perfect. If you've got that auto switch over, then you've got that second high speed card to switch over to, which is really, really useful. Okay. And our last one, we want to pick up on things like video capabilities. So we talked about this very briefly at the start, and video capabilities have been massively improved on this one. So Tesni, if you don't mind, I'll go through these quite kind of inclusively. We've got OM log, which we had before, OM log internal recording, and we now have 10-bit H.265 codec capability, which is an improvement over H.264. So this is really good. It's giving you loads and loads of freedom over color grading and editing and things like that. And as I said at the start, we've got HLG video picture format. So this is about high dynamic range, or HDR video. So it gives you this beautifully rich range of tones when shooting things that need lots and lots of detail in the highlights and the shadows. So HLG picture mode is now available as a shooting mode for video. And external recording. So we have 10-bit internal recording, 422 in video, okay, up to 4K 60 frames per second, cinema 4K 60 frames per second, various other different bits and pieces, H.264, H.265. Externally, to an external recorder like the Atomos Ninja or something like that, you've got 12-bit ProRes 444 raw recording. So that's going to give you full unlimited editing choice in post. And this is a really, really beautiful additional extra there for the video functionality. There are a couple of other things in there as well in terms of video, and we will look at doing some future events where we focus more on the video, because there is so much extra stuff to look on. Full video menu inside the main menu, lots of differences in terms of like sound recording and things like that as well. So some of the additional features, one of the big things, of course, is the user interface. Okay, so we have this gloriously updated menu configuration. We have these colored tabs now representing things like camera settings, a full dedicated AF menu, video menu, custom settings menu. Tesni, what did you think about this in comparison to the previous menus?
I cried. No, for me, obviously because I run workshops and whatnot, I had come to the point where I knew the old menu like the back of my hand. If you asked me where something was, I knew exactly what sub-tab it was in. I knew exactly what you had to go through. So learning a new menu is going to be painful for me. However, it does seem more intuitive. And one of the biggest things that I found people fed back about the menus is, at face value, there was just so much going on, and it was just a case of, where do I even start? Where do I go for this? So I think that once people who may have known the old system or the old menu really well transfer over, it will become pretty easy. It's just going to be that initial little transition, which is going to be fun, trying to relearn where everything is. But it won't take long.
I feel you. Nearly 10 years I've been using that older system, that older menu, and I got to the point where I was doing it in my sleep kind of thing. And now, as much as I love the new layout, I definitely have to put a bit of work in. But saying that though, I mean, I've been playing around with this new menu now for about 3 or 4 weeks, and it is already becoming more intuitive in terms of where things are, particularly some of the more important computational features, because computational mode has its own page here, you know.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker as well. So here's the thing that I've had phone calls from many of the ambassadors, many customers, trying to, where you've been out with one of your workshops, and a customer has asked you for some help, and there's been a grayed out option in the menu, and you've rang me up and gone, David, there's an option in the menu, it's grayed out, what is it? And we've had to like go through this series of elimination to kind of process it all and find out what stopped a function from being able to be used. Now, if the function is grayed out, we just have to hover over it and press OK, and the camera is explaining to us exactly why that is not available. And this is a phenomenally brilliant feature in terms of learning the system itself as well for users, but also in terms of being able to fix things quickly for my customers, your customers.
I don't need you anymore. Don't expect any more phone calls.
I feel very redundant. My phone is going to lie quiet for forever. But in the real world, it is a phenomenal addition to have that ability within those new menus.
Yeah, you still have my menu to find. You can just use the things that you usually use, pop it in a my menu, problem solved.
Exactly, that's it, and it's still full customization, so none of that has been taken away, which is really, really important to the system, you know. So we've got that beautiful new my menu, which is phenomenal. Let's have a look at what else we've got. We've added in an AF on button, a dedicated focus button. So Tez, previously you were used to using the AEL button and repurposing that into the back button focus, right?
Yes, but now I have 2 buttons, so I can program them separately, and it makes my life a lot easier.
Absolutely, and they are still completely customizable. So if you don't use back button focusing for whatever reason, or you don't use auto exposure lock, there are still customizable options behind there. We've still got the 1-2 lever that's behind the AEL button that's still there to be able to give you options of changing between, I don't know, continual focus, single focus, manual focus, or various other options that you can choose within the system. We've just added that extra button in, and it's just made that ergonomics for things like wildlife and back button focusing a little bit easier. Now, let's have a quick look at a kind of summary of everything else that's on here. And I was gasping for time there, because this is the part of my PowerPoint that takes a long time for some reason to move to the next slide. This is just a summary of the extra things that we've got in there. And I know that we sat on we had a meeting the other day on Teams, and we sat and looked at this and went, actually, there are so many extra things that have come in here. Let's just have a quick look. Let's go from the top. Dual UHS 2 slots for memory cards, 1053 phase detect cross quad pixel AF points, 8 stops of stabilization with your IS lens, 520 shots CEPA rating for that new battery, 2.5 times faster processing for high res shot. You've got your quad Bayer pattern, quad pixel stacked sensor in there, IP53 rated for weather sealing, power delivery, power and charge at the same time, TruePic X processor, frame rates of up to 50 and 120 frames per second for sequential shooting. You've got your video editions at 4K 60p up to cinema 4K. You've got full HD at 240p So really beautiful slow motion movies as well. Is that something that you've done recently, or is it something that you want to do, those slow motion wildlife shots, Tesni?
I was very sad when 4K 60 frame per second didn't come to some of the older cameras, because I love slow motion. So when I saw it was on this, it was just like, yes, another thing that I can use. So my editing is very minimal on anything to do with video. I definitely haven't progressed to the stage beyond iMovie, but still, just being able to get slower clips and being able to show those intricate details is going to be a big thing for me.
Yeah, it is really, really cool to have that kind of access to videos like that. So 10-bit internal video, H.264, 12-bit Pro Raw, external video as well, 444. So many superb things. A new blackout-free 5.76 million dot viewfinder. All those extra features, live ND 64 up to 64. All the other things that we couldn't actually fit in one page on there as well. With that in mind, Raman's asked a question. It's good seeing Raman. We've seen you in a lot of the previous events that we've done as well. Raman's asking that OM Systems advertised this as a WOW camera. This is something that our representatives from Japan said several months ago. And the question for you, Tesni, is it a WOW camera?
It's a good camera. It's a good camera. It's a good question. That's what I meant to say.
It's a good camera.
It's a good camera. It's a good question.
It's a good camera.
Just stop there. No, for me personally, when they announced this is going to be a WOW camera, I sat there and I just thought, that's risky. Because people are going to have such massive expectations. Everyone's going to have their own expectations, and I'm nervous that people will not have them met. And I'm not worried anymore. So for me, the 3 key things that make this a WOW camera is the bird tracking. Wow. It's never coming off. The higher ISO performance is going to be big for me, especially because as a wildlife photographer, as a landscape photographer, we do a lot of photography in bad light, and especially with wildlife, we can't drop that shutter speed. So having that extra ability to push the ISO higher means I can shoot for longer, and hopefully shoot longer into the blue hours as well, which are very, very nice when it comes to the aesthetics of your image. And the third thing, I struggle to think of a third thing because there's so many little bits that sort of compile together.
Yeah.
It's such a noticeable step up. And again, I was concerned, I was worried, you know, you're potentially building up for a fall and you haven't. And this is now going to absolutely be my primary shooter. I'm going to use it all the time. The EM1X will probably become my second shooter now. And I'm a happy girl, and good luck prying it out of my hands. You're not having it back. You're just not having it back.
That one that I brought up to you on Saturday, that's it now. Is that going to live with Tesni forever?
Sorry. I've
we'll sign the adoption papers later, okay?
Yeah, we just, you know, it's mine now.
No problem. We'll make that happen for you, don't worry. Well, that's really, really good to hear. And obviously that instills me with confidence. I have a lot of respect for the work that you do. So hearing you say that is a really, really great thing. I've known you for a long time now. I consider us very close personal friends. But as your professional opinion in an area that I don't particularly excel at, it's really important to hear that. So thank you for that kind of vote of confidence there. We are running out of time, so I'm going to kind of like sling through some of these questions and get a few more of these slides out of the way just to give people an idea of what else is going on. Keith is asking what material the camera body is made from. It's made from that magnesium alloy chassis that a lot of the other cameras have been made for. In fact, I do have one here. This is the EM1X magnesium alloy chassis, and it's hard as nails. It's really like I mean, I'm weak, I get that, but ultimately it is an absolute tough body, and this magnesium alloy is what is inside the OM1 as well. Hawks Wildlife Photography has asked, will the camera adjust focus through 120 frames per second? So no, it's single frame lock at 120 frames per second and 50 frames, Tez, right, at autofocus and tracking. So that's what you're going to get from that one. Let's have a look. Puck Jones has asked, will it be fully backwards compatible with Olympus cameras, lenses, and accessories? So obviously with lenses in Micro Four Thirds system, it's going to be compatible with our previous Zuiko lenses. Absolutely. There is a new battery grip and there is a new battery and accessories in terms of things like remote cable. Yes, the previous remote cable will work, but you won't be able to use any previous battery grips or batteries. So let's have a quick look at the rest of the system. So in speaking of accessories, what have we got? We're looking at the new HLD 10 battery grip, which will work in the same way as previous battery grips does. One battery in the grip, one in the camera. There's your BLX 1 lithium ion battery, which is the new standard. And there is the double charger, BCX1, which is the double battery charger. This is a brand new style of charger. Obviously, you don't have to have that. The power delivery and USB-C charging is fantastic, but that double charger is an option for you. And a wonderful piece of kit that's just come along is our RMWR1, which is the wireless remote control. But this works in two ways. It is a wireless remote control, which is has a pairing system that will pair with the OM1, but you can use it wired with previous compatible models. So you could use it wired with an EM1X, an EM5 Mark III, or an EM1 Mark III, or an EM1 Mark II. You could use that in a wired manner or wireless with the OM1. So that's a really nice additional feature as well. And of course, we announced our lovely 12 to 40 f2.8 Pro Mark II version, which we discussed earlier, with the improved weather sealing and the improved functionality in terms of computational photography. Of course, the 40 to 150 f4, that forms part of our f4 Trinity now. So we have got our 12 to 45 f4 Lens Pro, 8 to 25, and the 40 to 150 f4. Now they form a nice little group. And of course, that's IP53 rated as well. We've made some improvements to our OI Share app. So we will be updating that. That's going to become the OM Image Share app, and we will be adding extra functionality to that. OM Workspace version 2 and of course OM Capture version 3 are all updated versions of our software as well. Now we do have another slide that shows pre-order offers. A pre-order offer that I've got is specifically for the UK. Some of those pre-order offers around the world may match up, but it's really important that you have a look at what is on offer around the world. I'm going to show the slide anyway for those of you that does come from that are buying within the UK. Because like I say, the offer is very similar around the world, but do check in your local region what that pre-order offer is and be very mindful of the dates for that pre-order offer. By pre-ordering an OM1, definitely for the UK, between now and the 7th of March, you will get a free spare BLX1 battery and an extended warranty, bringing your total unit warranty up to 5 years. So that's a really, really nice pre-order offer that we get in there as well. Okay, let's get rid of that slideshow. That is the end of those slides, as exciting as they were. And what I've done with that is actually really compressed that. As Tez and I were talking the other day, there is so much to go into. And Tez, it's going to take us months to really kind of get to grips with everything in there, would you say?
Yeah, it's going to be hard, but we'll manage. And I'll be able to say backlit something sensor. I'm going to be able to say it because it tongue ties me like
backside illuminated live MOS sensor and that quad cross pixel AF system. Is there so many things that are just running off the tongue there? But ultimately, the most important thing is that even if we can't say it, they're in there and we know what they're doing, and what they're doing is a phenomenal job in there. I'm just kind of going to go through some of these added questions here that people are asking, just so that we can kind of get a grip on some of them. Peter Archdale is asking, is the cross quad pixel AF tracking available in all the main modes, CAF and SAF? Well, with the very nature of the way that cross quad pixel AF tracks, it is CAF functionality. So it's a constant refocusing tracking option rather than a single autofocusing option, Peter. And I hope you're well and Carol's well over there in Northern Ireland, because I know who you are. Thanks for asking. Elizabeth is asking, is there a slower frames per second rate possible? At 120 frames, there is a lot of photos to go through. Yeah, absolutely. You can break that down. We were looking at 60, 100, and 120 frames in first frame lock, and then you can do incremental of 5, 10, 25 and 50 in autofocus tracking as well. So loads of functionality in there. There are so many other questions that we're going to struggle to kind of answer tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, of course. But we're not going anywhere, and we're going to be producing lots more content and material over the next sort of days, weeks, and months with regards to the OM1. Our ambassadors like Tesni are going to be producing some great material, right? And you're going to be putting that out there for the world to see.
I will be. I have posted some sample images today, and assuming that you don't literally send a SWAT team to take this camera back, I will be out as often as possible trying to get some of our wonderful British wildlife. So I can't wait.
Excellent. I will try to keep the wolf from your door as long as I can. But ultimately, Tesni, it's been amazing to catch up with you as ever. Always really, really good to get your opinion on these things, which we respect massive amounts. So thank you for being with me tonight. Thank you to everybody that came in to listen to us introduce the OM1, this phenomenal new piece of equipment that's marking 50 years since the original OM1, which again is a legacy in its own right. We'll try to answer some questions in the comments later on if they didn't get answered, but we are here to support you. You can reach out to us through any of our social media channels and get in touch. You can also reach out to Tesni. Tesni's easy to get hold of online, social media, Instagram, and look after yourselves. We'll be back really soon to show you loads more cool things about the OM1. But for now, stay safe, stay shooting. Tesni, thanks for coming in, and bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.